Hello, everyone. This is Professor Gunner again, back with Natural and Artificial Environment. And today we're going to be looking at a metaphysical view or theory of sorts that is fairly common among inhabitants of the West. One that is steeped in reason, that utilizes the scientific method, experimentation, and observation. Now, obviously, the views of people and scientists and intellectuals have evolved over thousands of years. But I think we can say generally that the rise of the scientific method in its use and importance, the emergence of the natural sciences, and the success and transformations to human life that it has brought in the West have given much credence to this metaphysical view. Over time, what we have seen is that in the scientific community, more specifically, a certain view and set of methods has crystallized. A worldview, you might call it, that is scientifically minded. This is what I'm going to call the contemporary scientific worldview. And today we're going to explore it, as well as some of its philosophical implications and consequences. To do so, I'll be giving you just some information that is contained within Chapter 10 of Introduction to History and Philosophy of Science. So, let's begin. What I'm going to call the Contemporary Scientific Worldview, or the CSV, is constituted, the authors say, by a mosaic of different fields, bodies of knowledge, and methods. What we see in the West today, especially among those who are scientifically minded, is a body of knowledge that is constituted by research and bits of information from the fields of cosmology, psychology, quantum mechanics, general relativity theory, mathematics, history, economics, sociology, neuroscience, biology, genetics, and chemistry. So, if we're going to talk about the contemporary scientific view, we might say that it is informed by all of these different distinct fields and disciplines. Generally, it utilizes what is called the HD method, or the hypothetico-deductive method. This involves constructing a scientific theory on the basis of observation, experimentation, and predictive power. According to this view, our knowledge of the universe has greatly expanded due to the use of reason and the scientific method, that is, the formulation of a hypothesis, experimentation, observation, analysis, repeat. Thus, a lot of people have come to have a certain understanding of how the world works and where it came from by using this empirical method of observation and experimentation. A lot of people take this view for granted, but it's important to note that all worldviews, either explicitly or implicitly, contain a particular set of epistemological and metaphysical assumptions. The same is true for the contemporary scientific view. And based on my own limited understanding, this view is what we might call empiricist, monistic, naturalistic, materialistic, and reductionistic. Now, what exactly does all of that mean? Well, we went over this a little bit in the last lecture, but let's just do a little bit of a refresher. Generally, if somebody says that they believe in science or the science, or they are a scientist, they hold some combination of the following views, perhaps all of them. They hold what is known as the position or the view of empiricism. This is an epistemological view of how we obtain knowledge of the universe around us. Empiricism is the view that knowledge is obtained primarily through the senses. So we can come to understand the nature of reality by using our eyes, our ears, our sense of taste, our sense of touch, and so on. And then this is how we come to learn about the world generally through experience, through sensation. This is the epistemology that is used in the employment of the scientific method. Generally, the contemporary scientific view as well is what we might call monistic. It thinks that one underlying substance makes up everything in the universe. For the CSV, they generally take this substance to be matter. That is, everything is out there and everything in here is physical. It's made up of this thing called matter, uh, which is constituted by atomic and subatomic particles like electrons, protons, neutrons, their various combinations, all of that stuff. This view, I think, is also naturalistic. Remember what naturalism said. That is the view that nature is all that exists, and that all things supernatural do not exist. So there are no gods, demons, angels, devils, spirits, ghosts, or souls. Rather, everything that you see around you is a part or a product of nature, including ecosystems out there, including the buildings that we live in, including the human being and the human mind. This view is also materialistic. And what I mean by that is not that it cares a lot about material things like movies and TV shows or lamps and jewelry, but that it holds a particular view about what this stuff is, what tables, chairs, the human brain is. The materialists are going to say that everything in the universe is made up only of matter and energy. So, when we talk about chemical reactions, when we talk about emotions, when we talk about physical processes out there in the world, what we're talking about is matter undergoing various transformations or standing in relationship to other things. And generally, a lot of proponents of the contemporary scientific view are what we might call reductionistic. They think that we can explain all of the events and processes of our universe in terms of physical explanations. So, what's going on in the human mind? What's going on in the human body? What's going on out there? At bottom, it can be explained in terms of biological, chemical, and physical reactions and processes. With these general metaphysical views in mind, it might be helpful to get a little bit more deeply into what the contemporary scientific worldview says. Well, it offers a bunch of different views about the origins of the universe and its operations, life, and the existence of God. We might call the set of these views about how the world works and where it came from as cosmological, relativistic, quantum, evolutionary, agnostic, all kind of woven together. In other words, the contemporary scientific view gives us a cosmological understanding of the universe that is baked in general relativity, quantum mechanics, evolutionary theory, and holds a particular view about God. Since I only have a limited understanding of these things, I'll just go briefly over what these views say and what they imply. Although, if you'd like more information, I would highly encourage you to do your own research, because my understanding of these deep and difficult topics is rather limited. First, we have the cosmological relativistic component of this view. This element stipulates that we can trace the origin of our universe to the Big Bang, a singularity of dense, energy and plasma and stuff of immense power that at some point, you might say, exploded or expanded into what we see today. So, the Big Bang is the origin of our universe, and seemingly our universe is still expanding today. All the galaxies are moving away from each other, and it is seemingly infinite. We have not perceived or noticed any edge to it. Although there are various views about whether or not our universe is closed in on itself, is a flat plane, or is curved, generally speaking. Along with this view, contemporary scientists have come to believe that objects with mass curve space around them, and objects that have certain mass, time flows differently around them. Along with this view, contemporary scientists think that there aren't any true voids, that is, there aren't any true empty spaces. What we have, rather, is a plenum, or what you might say is a full universe that is filled with particles, waves, energy, and radiation. Along with this view, scientists have also made leaps and bounds in the field of quantum mechanics, which also influences the contemporary scientific view. Quantum mechanics, we have found, stipulates that matter has a wave-particle duality. So it has both particle-like properties and it has wave-like properties. Matter, we found through experimentation, has been found to be extremely fuzzy, or inherently fuzzy, I should say. We take it for granted that objects in our environments have a fixed location and momentum in space-time. But what we found, for example, through the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, is that objects aren't actually like that. Because objects have both wave and particle-like properties, their location and momentum in space is inherently fuzzy. It is not completely fixed and determinate. That is, perhaps until we measure it. What also underlies this view is what is known as probabilistic determinism. And this is the view that the way that wave functions collapse, the operations of the universe, generally speaking, are probabilistically determined. So, given an initial set of conditions, it may be the case that if you allow the system to evolve, different things may happen if you were able to run that same experiment multiple times. But there is only a limited set of events given any set of initial conditions. So, what happens in the universe isn't random, but strictly speaking, even if we had all of the knowledge of the universe, we wouldn't be able to predict what was going to happen with 100% accuracy. Instead, there is some sort of element, from our point of view, of chance or luck or randomness to how processes and waves evolve and what ends up happening. Finally, along with this view, scientists have also determined that there is a thing in our universe called quantum entanglement. For a long time, we thought that the speed of light was fixed and it was kind of a speed limit for the transfer of information in our universe. And by and large, this is still true and people still believe in it. But what we have found is that no matter the distance, there seem to be aspects of our universe that are quantumly entangled with each other, such that once something in one element of that entangled pair changes, the other part of the pair changes instantaneously. This would seem to defy the laws of physics as we know it, but this is an empirical reality that we have observed. So, both the theory of general relativity and quantum mechanics inform contemporary scientists' understanding of the world. Although both of these views are kind of in contrast to one another, and we have not actually found a way to unify them. What we have found instead is that the quantum mechanics view holds for very small things, And the theory of general relativity seems to hold for massive things or things of larger scales. Along with these two views or theories about how phenomena work in our universe, there is the evolutionary view, which undergirds contemporary science's understanding of biology and life. According to this view, life spontaneously arose on our planet and evolved to what we see today through natural selection, genetic mutation, and reproduction, and that all life on Earth can be traced back to a common ancestor, including humans. So, all of the life that we see on Earth came from a common ancestor and evolved over billions of years into what we see today. Finally, we might also talk about the general attitude or view that contemporary science has towards God. We might call this the agnostic or the atheistic view, depending on how you define those terms. Generally, contemporary science doesn't think that God is needed to explain the operations of the universe or the origins of life or how all this stuff works. Thus, a lot of contemporary scientists believe that God does not exist, or at least that we cannot know that God exists. So, it doesn't have a theological or a theistic component to it. The interesting thing about this view, like all other worldviews, is that it has certain consequences or implications if one thinks through these metaphysical presuppositions fully. Thus, all of the characteristics of the contemporary scientific view that I just mentioned, well, they imply some interesting things about the nature of our reality and the human being. Things which get right to the heart of the fundamental questions in philosophy. Based on our contemporary scientific understanding of the world, it appears like our existence was a cosmic accident. Doesn't seem like there is a reason why we are here, and it doesn't seem like there's an objective purpose for our lives. Our existence as human beings being just another part in this long evolutionary chain in which life happened to arise on our planet, and the universe is indifferent to our concerns and our very existence. Similarly, if we take the theory of evolution at face value, it would imply that human beings are just more complex, evolved animals. We are not ultimately different or separate from them. Again, we just happen to be the animal that's at the top of the food chain. We have some sort of reasoning capacities, but all of our traits and characteristics have been ultimately molded by evolution into what we see today. So, we aren't a different kind of thing in the ultimate sense compared to bears and apes and things like that. Similarly, if we are to take the contemporary scientific view's materialism at face value, this would lead us to believe some things about the nature of the human mind. More particularly, this view is going to imply that mental processes cannot exist without a physical substance, the brain. And thus, it's our physical brain, or the physical and electrical processes in our bodies and brains, that give rise to our mental states. What this implies is that, well, we don't have some kind of immaterial mind that exists separately from the brain. Our conscious experience and unconscious experience of reality can be explained through physical processes and explanations, neuronal firings, electrical workings, chemical reactions. So, the feelings of love that we have, of hope, our dreams, and our memories, all of these ultimately are just physical relations between physical things, running electricity, neurotransmitters, neurons doing neuron stuff. If that is the case, it would also seem to imply that, according to the contemporary scientific view, there isn't much of a robust sense of the human person or personal identity. If we are just an amalgamation of atoms and electricity and chemical reactions, we don't have a soul that makes us who we are. We're just an amalgamation of material stuff. So, who Professor Gunnar is just this complex arrangement of particles and waves. And if we analyze the human person, and that is how we understand what they are, you might question whether or not the person really exists at all. If we are just an amalgamation of atoms, well, that is what we are fundamentally. We don't have an immaterial soul or a mind or personal identity separate or distinct from our physicality. Likewise, if we are just an amalgamation of atoms following probabilistic deterministic laws that we have no control over, and we can't control when the neurons in our brain fire, and we can't control which chemical reactions occur or which neurotransmitters we are lacking, it would appear that we don't have free will, or that we don't have genuine control over what we think, believe, and do. Instead, what we think and believe and do are just determined by what's going on in our brain, what our brain is making our body do, what our brain is making us feel, what our brain is making us hope and dream. Similarly, if it's true that we don't actually have free will, and we are something like a complex biological electric meat machine, then that would also seem to imply something about the nature of our criminal justice system. If nobody has control over what they think, say, and do, it doesn't seem fair and just for us to punish people for what they do, because it's not their fault. Ultimately, they don't have control over their actions. Their brain made them kill those people, or their brain made them rape that person. Along similar lines, the contemporary scientific view has a hard time justifying the existence of an objective standard of morality. If everything in the universe is physical, and what is right and what is wrong is not something that we can measure or see or taste or touch, it doesn't appear like anything is ultimately objectively right and wrong. There is just what happens and things that we may like or dislike depending on what our point of view is and what our desires and goals are. Thus, although the contemporary scientific view is rather mainstream and a lot of people believe in it, like all worldviews, it comes with, well, various metaphysical presuppositions, and it implies some very important but deep and fundamental things about how we experience reality. It would seem to imply that, again, free will does not exist, God does not exist, and perhaps we are the same kind of thing as what is living out there in the forest. For a lot of people, this is not troubling. This does not make them sad, and it may even be liberating. That is not, it's not my job to try to convince you whether any of that is right or wrong. It is my job rather to just open up your perspective to not only the philosophical implications of this view, but the other views that we're going to be looking at in this unit. More to the point, however, this view implies some things about some of the very important questions that we've been raising in this class. one of the things that we started with was the distinction between natural and artificial. But if the contemporary scientific view is correct, then it doesn't seem like there is any ultimate difference between what is natural and what is artificial. If everything is just a part of nature, we could say ultimately everything is just natural. Computers and iPhones and electrical sockets are natural, just like ecosystems out there in the environment are natural. Or culture, religion, and politics as being an outgrowth of human beings who are biological, chemical, physical, material things is natural, just like a plant growing in a field is natural. Along similar lines, in relation to the second unit, the contemporary scientific view raises important questions about whether or not the artificial environments that we are in are good or bad, and whether or not we can actually change them. If we are simply just material beings moved by natural laws and processes, is there anything that we can really do about the state of the world? Or are things just determined to be a certain way? We make all these claims about injustice and unfairness, immorality and oppression, but can we actually do anything about that at the end of the day? I suppose, according to this view, we will do whatever our brains make us do. But we don't know what that's going to be. And we might also ask, if all that exists is matter and energy, which casts doubt on the justifiability of an objective moral standard, is anything that is happening out there in society or in nature actually wrong? Again, we talk about injustice and oppression and suffering and pain. But according to this naturalistic view, all of that is just a part of how nature works. Is it really objectively immoral that that is happening? Are we actually treating the environment immorally? Or is that just how things go? These are some of the questions that you should be asking uh, while listening to this lecture and meditating on these metaphysical views. There are going to be strengths and weaknesses to every metaphysical theory that we look at. But we start with this one because it is the one that is most mainstream and most widely held among intellectuals and scientists today. As we move forward in this unit, we're going to investigate other metaphysical theories, and we're going to explore what they have to say about the nature of our universe, our relationship to the environment, and generally, how we should be thinking about this stuff and how we should live. I hope you found this interesting and enlightening. I will see you in the next lecture. Okay, bye-bye.